Bonjour les amis. This is Generator coming to you directly from the City of Light. I'm Jane Bertch, a Chicago native, Paris-based entrepreneur, author, and your partner in personal reinvention. I've spent the past 20 years living and working in Paris, and after leaving the corporate world and deciding to create something of my own, I've discovered both the beauty and the challenge of building a life shaped by curiosity, creativity, and a sprinkle of courage. These are the practices that lead to true transformation. So whether you're planting a seed in your jardin secret, your secret garden, or giving voice to your creativity for the very first time, let's step into your next chapter with intention. And of course, with a touch of Parisian charm. So as we say in French, on y va, let's go. Bonjour les amis. Welcome back to Generator. Today I am so thrilled to have just a magnificent lady with me that I'm so enchanted by because she's just a fabulous woman and we have a lot in common, but the inverse. So we'll talk about that. I'm so happy to welcome Anne-Laure Pingreoun here with us today, who has recently moved back to France. And so we're going to learn all about this incredible career she has in an area that is so dear to French people, which is art. So Anne-Laure, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so pleased. So let's start with, how did the Anne-Laure that I know get here today?
I would say pretty unexpected one, because especially back in the days, I think things have changed quite a bit now for the younger generation, where I think it's celebrated to be able to do lots of different things versus, I think back in our days, you had to stick to your line and you had to learn something and become something, that was it. Versus I think now the new generation, you can be a singer, an actor, writer, whatever, and then that's totally fine. But I actually did a business school. So I have this sort of left brain, right brain going on. And yeah, I loved it. But then always wanted to have something creative. So I started actually my career working for an ads agency. So I started on the agency side of things in London. I went back to France for like a year or two, but then went back to London and then moved to New York. But this time around working on the design side of things. And for me, it was much more interesting because I felt advertising was a lot of work for just a very small amount of time. You know, you would see an advertising a campaign for like 5-10 seconds on TV and you're like, oh my gosh, I've lost so many nights out of it for just that. Versus design had this sort of more thoughts going into what you're creating. It's more an object that will stay and more storytelling around it as well, which then led me to go more into the art and design, collectible design, because I had the great opportunity to work with the team that started Want to Design in New York. So it just really gave me this sort of openness about there's an entire world out there that I never encountered before. And so the only way for me to be within the art and design world was to go through an agency, but you didn't have to. So I launched Altum.
So how do you think that opportunity happened for you? For listeners, you have to understand, and we've talked about this before, but I really want to focus on it for just a second. We don't understand as North Americans the pressure that people have here in this country about staying on a specific professional track. I mean, it is immense, and heaven forbid you step away from what has historically been the profession of your parents and their parents. I mean, that's huge. Yeah. So to have the gumption to say, you know what, okay, I love business. You went to business school, but then you started to see this other area and you dared to explore it. And a lot of people don't allow themselves that. How do you think you did that?
You know, when I was younger, I was obsessed with the UK. I was spent most of my summers in the UK and I felt very British in the way that I was thinking and looking at the world. So I think that enabled me to, like you said, be curious and say, you know what, I know there's the path that I'm expected to take, but maybe there's another path I need to explore, and open this sort of curiosity and boldness, I guess, into trying things out. Working in the UK, where you start working, I think really forges you for how you are. And I think starting in London gave me a very kind of specific mindset on how I see work and how I see new business, how I see creating companies and so on. And then working in the US gave me this sort of next level of being even more entrepreneur because you have to be like that when you live in New York. Like you said, not completely just removing your roots, because that's not what I did. And obviously I'm back in France now, but it's much more about just embracing, I think, your kind of maybe punk-ish side.
Punk-ish. I love that. But something you said there really I reflect upon. You said not losing your roots. And I've been talking about this term that I love, that I feel like is a French cultural term, which is le fil rouge. The thing that no matter what we do somehow keeps us together. It's all cohesive, even if it feels so different. And having your roots in France, how did they influence what you're doing now?
It's funny because I never thought it did. I thought I was very British. And then my husband, always used to say, you're very French. You're very French. And then I'm like, no, really. But now I realize that I am indeed very French. I think in the sense that there's this sort of no BS in how we say things and the approach to things. And I thought it was just me, but it's clearly something that I think is ingrained in a lot of us in France. It's also, I think, this sort of storytelling approach to whether it's a brand, whether it's our lives, there's this sort of communication that is very important that I guess I kept, but used that within my business, not understanding that it was something that was really ingrained in me. So I think it's little things that as I moved through life, I understood that things were taking me back to my roots, through different ways, I guess.
So one thing that we have in common is spending a good part of our lives outside of our home country. Us feeling like we are associating with one culture, but we're now this melange of different cultures. I have somebody who just recently told me I was very French.
It's really good. You are, very much so.
Well, in a funny way. So if you're listening to this now, you know that in Paris, we've just had this massive heat wave that we're now over. Yesterday morning, it was cool. I had on a scarf around my neck. And I ran into a friend who said, dear God, Jane, you have become so French. The cold neck. I digress. But one thing that is so special when you have an international experience is all of the little things that you've picked up and carried with you. So tell me, how did you adapt in those different cultures? Were there any tools, or did you just kind of just dive right in?
The UK, again, there was this sort of weird appeal to England and to Scotland, actually. As a kid, I think kids sometimes pester their parents to have a pet. I was pestering my parents to go to the UK, which is really bizarre. Yeah, so I spent a lot of my summers in beautiful families in Devon and Yorkshire and so on. So it was a natural fit for me to then go and live there. I did a university exchange there for a year. So there was no massive cultural shock. It's just fit right in. It was more, I lived in other countries like Belgium and Denmark and so on. And that was a bit more of a learning curve on, okay, we're being perceived as French. But I think the moment you understand how to fit into one country, it's then easy to fit in all the others, because I think there's this sort of a set of rule on how to adapt. And I think it just helped me, for example, to spend a lot of time in China and adapt really well. It's just this sort of continuously will to learn versus feeling like, oh, this is something I don't understand and therefore I can't adapt to it. Versus I'm like, yeah, this is great. I'm going to morph into something else. There's this other beautiful expression, actually, I think it might be Japanese, but to say the whole bamboo situation for it to be hard and to break, but then goes with the winds. And it's how you should be, I think, in life in general, where you can adapt to a lot of things, a lot of events that happen to you, good or bad. And it's the same thing when you adapt to a culture.
Right. Wonderful. So let's fast forward to you today. Tell us about this wonderful businesses you've created.
Alta is 12 years old now, which is crazy. Big baby. Yeah. It just came at a point where I've had that thought, and that's discussions that you and I have had quite a lot on how do you go from just a thought to an actual business. And I was thinking a lot about doing what I wanted to do with Alta, which is to curate art with brands at the time mainly. And I was like, no one really is doing that because curators are in galleries or in institutions and then not really with brands. But how do you do that? Because I was known for managing agencies. How do I then set myself up to doing something completely different for people to also pay me for that? So it took me a little while to figure it out. And then the opportunity arose and I just went for it and set up my own company. And yeah, like within 2-3 weeks, I had everything kind of sorted, my logo, my company name, and just I had 1 or 2 clients who were like, okay, we bet on you and let's go. So Alta just went from really kind of working a lot with brands to then, doing work with cities, again, institutions, with property developers all around the world, which is really, really exciting. And then I co-founded Mayfair Design District with James Pingreoun. He launched in 2017, and then I joined as a co-founder in 2022. And it is very much about bringing culture, creating community around culture in central London.
So what I also love, when you're so close to things, sometimes it's hard to express them, but culture and arts are so ingrained into the friends I have that are from this country. How and why does that start? What is that about? I find it beautiful. I feel totally out of depth, but there's a desire and a need to constantly fuel yourself with culture.
I think it's different. It comes from, I'm experiencing this at the moment through my stepkids, and it's interesting to see the difference in education and how the French, history is such a big thing. And then you start, again, if you're curious like me, and I used to love history, you realize it's everywhere. So then the history links to art pretty quickly, and architecture. And then you just create like interesting links with everything. And then brands are really good at bringing arts and storytelling into their world as well. And so I think it's something that is naturally around us here, that, like you said, people talk about, that it just feels a lot more natural. People will go to museums a lot more, go to galleries. Things are a lot more democratic as well. So you would have, like, which I love during the summer, these sort of little festivals of people just reenacting historical moments, but it's like little villages coming together. It's not something for the few, but something for the masses, which is very different from other cultures. Yeah, which I'm really proud of, to be honest, as well.
Yeah, I've heard you talk just in our private conversations about the importance of bringing art to communities. Tell me about that.
Living in the States, seeing that it is something that only the few can experience. You're not going to necessarily go to a museum and say, I'm going to learn something about art or whatever you're going to say. I don't feel comfortable. I've never learned about it. I don't want to feel silly because I don't know what it is. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't, whether you get it or not, whether you know the full story or not. Like, my cousin used to bring his little kids, Zoe, at the time, go to Pompidou, and we give her like a little, either his phone or like a little camera, and then she would go around and take lecture pictures and give her POV on what she felt about this portrait or whatever. And there was no like, oh, she's too young or whatever. And I think it's very important for me to be able to bring that to spaces like countries in the US or the UK, which feels like a little bit more detached from all of that. Because once you bring it outside, especially in the street, people love it. They connect with it. It's not this sort of detached thing that they feel they don't belong. And even like raising profiles of young talents and exhibiting them in Mayfair. Because again, you have beautiful, insane, gorgeous galleries over there, but it's a lot of big names. So how do you showcase like a young artist from Devon or from New Jersey that would like to be able to have a platform to show his or her work in central London? Yeah.
Right. So you've given me a whole new perspective on art. And of course, yes, it's connection to history and often the depiction of history. So we can see these moments and how beautiful that is, and how you've taken something that in some cultures can be seen as very elitist or can signal your socioeconomic positioning, and you're making it democratic
Yep.
for people to
Yeah.
enjoy. That's quite beautiful. And I'll just remind whoever's listening out there that when I hear people say they'd love to be French or they want to be French, I remind them it's not the ballerinas, it's not the lipsticks or the handbag that I love about France, which some people focus on. It is the desire for culture. I have never been to a French dinner party where somebody did not float
Of
a
course.
exhibition they've recently been to.
Can be again
Always.
intimidating when you first encounter that, or can also feel like sometimes when I was in New York, all my friends, the only thing we were talking about was work, because that's the only thing we had time to do. And that's the only thing we were discussing. And I was like, oh, I miss these sort of really random conversations about what do you think about the new Cadler exhibition? And then everyone would start, going on, well, I think this and blah, blah, blah. And it's marvelous because you might not have a POV, but then you might have one at the end of the conversation. It's really something quite unique, I think, to the French. Yeah.
Absolutely. So speaking of quite unique, and you've been very modest about it, but you've kind of like paved a way before there was one. You started offering services before people even knew that they existed. How? Not in the logistics, but in the spirit inside of you, because I think this is so important for women to hear. So often they have these ideas that they never get out of their mind, which is a disservice to everyone. How did you dare? Did you even think about daring, or was it just, I'm just going to do it?
Well, what's the worst that can happen? You find something else or you start something else. It's okay.
Yeah.
But I think I am coming from a family who's used to have 9-to-5 jobs, and no one really is an entrepreneur in my family. So I'm the other one, definitely the other one.
Excellent.
And it was something when I first launched my company, especially with my parents, was a lot of questioning on like, you'll be fine the first year, second year, you'll be difficult, third year, you're pretty close, because that's what happens. You're not going to last. Because that's what was put in people's mind, and it's mainly fear. It's mainly failure is something very different in France than in the US. Failure in the US is like, well, I've tried, didn't work, I'll try something else. Here it's like, it will follow you till you die. It's just this sort of like dark shadow that is around you, which is really weird. I don't know if you ever come across him, but there was this sort of larger than life human being called Bernard Tapie. And this guy did everything in his life. Like he was a singer, then he was a businessman, and then he booked Adidas. He did so many things. He ended up in jail because obviously there was some sort of money laundering, whatever, somewhere. But the guy, he ended up, doing theater plays at the end of his life. Why not? But he every time was saying, what's the worst that can happen?
I love that spirit, and I feel it's so rare. And yes, you're quite right, and I've learned this. One, not staying on your path is very difficult here. Two, risk avoidance around failure is very high here. And there's something beautiful to be said when you realize that failure is just data. It's like a scientific experiment. Scientists don't go into something expecting it's going to work. They go in and they test and they see, okay, that doesn't work. I'm going to use that from a future test. And that's such a wonderful thing that you've carried with you through your career. Was that something that you just learned to adapt to, or did you see examples of it?
I would say it's probably my mom, to be honest. My mom is this sort of happy-go-lucky type of person. She always said to me, yeah, what's the worst that can happen? Which sometimes looking back, I'm like, why on earth did she ask me to do this? Like, you don't ask me to do this, but if I was to say, oh, I feel like writing to Jacques Chirac, she'd be like, yeah, you should just do it. You never know, he might reply. So I was like, sure, great. But there was never a doubt that he was not going to reply and then I shouldn't try. And I think that's this sort of, like spirit of trying. Doesn't matter. So I did that quite a lot. And then I was also doing a lot of theater, dance. So I was also like in representation, leading a lot of things. So I always also had that in me in terms of, I think, be a bit out there and not being scared of doing things, which I think you can't be shy about what you're going to do. Because if you want to launch your company, you're going to have to be a little bit loud about it, and you're going to have to stand for yourself and say, I have the best brand ever with the best proposal, and this is great, even if you haven't got anything to show. So therefore, I think you need to have this sort of maybe theatrical kind of side of you, which a lot of people don't like to do in your business because it's scary. They don't like to meet new people. They don't like to write to new people. And I love it. I love to say, you know what, I've just written to the CEO, blah, blah, blah. And he sent me an email back saying, this is great. Why not?
Yeah. So let me just pull out two things that I think are so important. One, it's the people you surround yourself with. And you were lucky to have that mom that said, write to Jack Chirac, do it. And so whoever is out there listening, again, it may not be your mom, it could be a friend, or it could be a new community group, or it could be a new business group. You need to be with people who will say, yes, why not? Do it. You need to have that community that helps to give you courage.
Because you will have more people that will be scared for you and tell you not to do it than people to say that, you should, I think.
Yeah. And often, let's say the people that tell you don't do it, some of them it's because they love you and they're afraid for you. Some of them because they just don't know how to do it themselves. So find your group. That's so important. You need to sometimes come out of your day-to-day with the people you're with who love you as you are, to then find people who can help you become who you want to be. There's that. But then there's also one other thing that Anne-Laure said that really stuck to me, which is you have to develop your curiosity and your courage muscles. They don't always come overnight. And sometimes rejection is the best way to do that. The more you get those no's or lack of responses, the less they impact you.
It's also not personal. It's not personal. When somebody says, I'm not interested, or I don't want to do that, I'm not like, oh my God, they don't like me. Or, I've done something wrong, whatever. I'm like, okay, they don't understand what I do, or it's not relevant to them. And that's fine. That's totally fine.
Exactly. And you move on and you're like, okay, next. And yes, it does take time to train those muscles, but you have to train them. You have to put yourself in positions where you're stepping into new rooms, you're meeting new people, you're knocking on doors, you're pushing doors open. That doesn't happen just sitting at your computer. Wow. Life lessons. So speaking of life, if you were to identify one or two people, maybe it's somebody who's no longer here, I don't know. Are there any role models that have influenced you? Are there any people that you think you've really liked watching who they are and you've said, I want to be some of that, or I want to be that person? But before you answer, tell me if I'm wrong. I've asked this to a few of my girlfriends that are French, and the concept of role model does not seem to exist here.
I'm a bit different because I lived abroad so early and I was more British or American than French in that sense. But because I spent a lot of time there, then I was in search of that mentor. I was in search of that person to guide me. And I never did. And then I was getting very frustrated because I was like, I could see some of my friends, my mentors coming, or my blah, blah, blah's coming. And I was like, oh, why don't I have one? And then I thought, you know what? The best role model for myself is myself. Because at the end of the day, I have a lot of people that I feel inspired by, but they're not someone that have the whole package. So I'm going to have someone that I really respect and admire for their business, maybe way of thinking. And then somebody else is how they, like an artist who's got a very different way of thinking about life. And then I have my amazing husband who's helping me through and through and being here for me day in and day out. He inspires me every day. But there's no one person that's necessarily has it all. And sometimes I think, I try to work on myself all the time to be that, not necessarily role model, but more, I have to inspire myself. Otherwise, I can't move forward, I think.
There's so much to unpack there. This is round one. I think we're going to have our own YouTube channel after this. I've always said that role models are your future version of you, but I've always meant it in that the attributes, because what I know about Bosma St. John, who I watch on Instagram,
Yeah.
I know nothing about her life, but I'll see the way she speaks, or I'll see the way she shows up, or it could be the lady that works at Franprix. I see the way that she addresses people. And so it's the attributes that we should focus on. So there's that. I think that's so important, especially these days when we feel like we know people because we see them on social media. Please don't. Think about the attributes. There's that. And then the most powerful thing you have said yet, and I'm going to make a t-shirt out of it that I'll wear on my head. You said, I think about how to inspire myself.
Yeah.
My gosh. Yes. Because no one else is coming.
Or you can be waiting for that person and sit on your sofa all day long and say, well, I can't do this because I haven't met that person. And it's just, what do you do? Again, this is rules that are being given to us on how we should behave and how we should do things. But we're pretty strong, all of us. And that's something I always talk to my husband about. I say, let's build instead of trying to deconstruct things. And if we build, even if it's from crap, you have a terrible few months because of lots of different reasons, whether it's personal or professional. But that can still be a fuel for something positive. You can still build from that. But a lot of people use that as an excuse to not move or to not find a way out.
I absolutely agree with you there. Every once in a while, somebody will say to me, Jane, you're constantly doing things. And I'm constantly trying because I love to create. And not just because I think everything is going to turn out to be this fabulous success story, but the value in the act of creating is so important. It gives you new ideas. It gives you new perspectives. Hopefully you meet new people. If we can let ourselves love that journey rather than worry about what it's going to be in the end.
And sometimes you set yourself up, you think you're going to do this. And like you said, you meet someone on the way and then actually that idea is never going to go anywhere. But because you met that person, you're going to create something else with that person. And then the end goal was never to create that first idea in the first place, but to meet that person and create something else. But if you didn't start it, it would have never happened. I always say as well, like usually when it does not make sense on paper, it's usually the right solution. Every time I'm like, oh, it's great. It just makes a lot of sense. Usually it's not the right thing for me. When I'm like, it makes no sense whatsoever, but somehow it feels right, it always works out.
Another t-shirt. Anne-Laure, thank you. I think people are going to love all the gems that you gave in this discussion and so much to go away and think about.
It was great to talk to you as always.
I'm so thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for joining. And who knows, we may yet have to have our own YouTube channel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne-Laure. Before we go any further, if what I've been talking about today resonates with you, I want you to know there's a space for you that I've created. Several times a year, I gather a small group of women in Paris for what I call les saisons, the seasons. These are my retreats. They are very tiny, very intimate. Each one is designed around the time of year. So not just the season we're in physically, but hopefully the season we're in our internal seasons. And it's just a wonderful time to return to ourselves. In spring, we talk about planting. In September, it's the rentrée season, which is a beautiful time in Paris. And in the fall, it's the harvest, la vendange, because how can we not talk about wine and all those wonderful messages? So these are not spa weekends, they're not shopping, they're not tourist trips. These are 3 days in one of the most transformative cities in the world, designed to help you pause and realign and start to really think and step into what's next for you. And the women who come, they're curious, they're brave, they're open-hearted, they're just phenomenal. They're hopeful, they're community-based. And if that sounds like you, I'd love to have you join. So take a look at my website. I'm constantly updating different dates for Les Saisons retreats, and I'd love to have you here. You can find them all at janebertch.com. retreats.